Hello again. Welcome one and all. Thank you for joining us for our fourth training session in the Business Basics training series. I'd like to extend a really special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time, and a very warm welcome to those of you who joined us for the previous sessions in the last 3 weeks. This webinar series is made possible by the Big Up Small Business Project, which is a joint initiative of TUI Care Foundation and the Travel Foundation. The Big Up Small Business Project aims to create new opportunities for small, micro, and medium entrepreneurs in Jamaica to benefit from tourism. This particular Business Basics webinar series is part of our capacity building support under the project and is being brought to you by the Travel Foundation in partnership with TPDCO. As I mentioned before, this is the fourth in a series of 5 webinars. The final webinar on digital marketing will take place next week, Thursday, on the 3rd of November. So please make sure you register for that one. Today's training will focus on how to future-proof your business. And in this session, we're going to be exploring how to make your business strong and sustainable by providing you with tips and guidance on how to save costs on energy and other resources, while also caring for the environment and also for your staff and the local community. Now, as with the previous webinars, after today's webinar, not today, but certainly by next week, we'll be sending you an email with a link to the manual as well as the recording for this topic. Next slide. So I'm Coral Williams. I'm the Jamaica Program Coordinator for the Travel Foundation, and I'm going to be your host for today. But before we begin, I just want to take you through a few housekeeping matters. As this is a webinar really, your audio and your video are disabled. So we're going to ask you to just feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves and your businesses to each other. And you can also use the chat to provide any feedback that you may have as the presentation goes on. If you have questions though, please use the Q&A button for that. You may post your questions at any time during the presentation. And when we get to the question and answer segment, we'll answer them. At this time now, I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, who is also the main presenter for today, Rebecca Armstrong. Rebecca is a sustainable tourism specialist at the Travel Foundation, and she's based in our UK office in Bristol. She originally trained and worked as a lawyer before making a career change into tourism. She has worked with a wide range of companies, destinations, and industry organizations in a variety of locations. Rebecca is passionate about working to ensure that tourism generates positive benefits for local people and places, and she particularly enjoys working to support local tourism businesses to access the tourism market through this project. Rebecca is now going to take you through how to future-proof your business.
Thank you very much, Coral. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As Coral mentioned, we're going to be looking at future-proofing, and I thought I'd start with really looking at why this makes good business sense. Many small and medium tourism businesses are realising that making sustainability a key part of how they operate makes really good business sense. And it is easy to make quite a big difference just through some simple steps really to get started. So making your business more sustainable, firstly, can help you future-proof your business, really kind of build resilience. And I think we've all been through a very difficult couple of years as a tourism industry, and finding ways to to make your business stronger is definitely at the top of people's agenda at the moment, I think. And responsibly managing risks for your business, so ways of doing that. It also obviously offers ways of reducing your operating costs by cutting the amount that you spend on things like energy, fuel, water, waste disposal, etc. Again, something I think that is at the top of people's minds at the moment in many businesses across the world, really looking very carefully at costs. It gives us the opportunity to contribute positively to protecting the natural environment and to wider climate action. And again, for Jamaica, I think that's a topic that is, again, receiving quite strong attention. The World Bank reports, for example, that Jamaica faces very serious threats from hotter temperatures, droughts and floods linked to climate change and sea level rise. And this obviously has an impact on holidaymakers' choice to visit and the time of year that they may be comfortable doing so. So again, taking action really to address some of those impacts is important too for local businesses. It helps us respond to tour operator and investor demands. We'll have a quick look at that in a moment, as well as the requirements of customers for sustainability. And it also just helps you have a clear framework. I think sometimes it's hard to know where to start. So thinking about some of the impacts and some of the actions that we can take gives us that framework to make a start and then track progress, and also to work with others as well. We're not alone in doing this. So it provides a means of getting support and working with others too. So just looking at some of those sustainability trends, as I mentioned, sustainability really is increasingly guiding customers' choices. And the more that you can show that your business is responsible, that it's taking steps to minimise those negative impacts and also to maximise positive impacts on the local community that you work in and the environment, the more that will enhance the appeal of your product to potential customers. So as some of these quotes from recent reports show, it really is kind of moving up customers' agenda. You know, that quote from Booking.com, 72% of travellers think companies should offer more sustainable choices. The Exodus survey, 78% of travellers considered themselves to be more ethically conscious than they were a year ago. So positioning your business in terms of taking action on these issues really helps mark you out, I think, in terms of customer expectations. And then also from a tour operator perspective as well, you know, they're increasingly looking at their suppliers and sort of scrutinising what actions they are taking, and they want to work positively with local suppliers that really are taking these issues seriously. So this slide from TUI just shows the kind of things that they're focusing on: greener and fairer holidays, hotels that meet sustainability criteria, looking at things like single-use plastic items removed from suppliers' portfolios. So it's showing really, I think, that even though for small and medium businesses, sometimes formal certification is quite a difficult thing, actually just mapping out what you are doing and the steps that you are taking so that you can have those conversations with tour operators and others, you know, OTAs, etc., showing that you understand the issues and that you're taking it seriously as a business is really important. So what should you focus on? As I mentioned at the start, it's sometimes quite difficult to know where to start. So we've divided it into 8 suggested areas to focus on. We're going to go through each of these in turn today. Some will be more relevant than others depending on the type of business. But I'm going to go through each of them in turn, with a few suggested ideas of actions to take, but also quite a lot of case studies. I think that's often helpful in bringing it to life, to see what other businesses around the world and in Jamaica are doing on these different topics. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the first topic, on climate action, because really that's the biggest challenge facing us as businesses and as a tourism sector at the moment. So the format for today is that we'll look at that issue first. We'll then pause for some questions. So please do put any questions in the question and answer box, and Coral will monitor that as we go through. So we'll have a short pause after that first topic, and then we'll go through the other 7 a bit more briefly. So the first topic, as I said, climate action, reducing your carbon emissions. This really is the hot topic at the moment, and it's certainly one that tour operators and OTAs are increasingly aware of their responsibility, and also wanting to work with suppliers in terms of addressing carbon emissions and working together really to tackle such a big issue. So tourism has a strong connection, really, I would say almost a kind of circular connection with climate change, as hopefully this diagram illustrates. So it contributes to climate change, but it's also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, particularly at destination level, as I mentioned earlier, in relation to the ways that it's affecting Jamaica. So in terms of emissions from travel and tourism constitute up to 12% of global emissions, and that's obviously from aviation and transport, but also from energy use, waste, water, etc., used in destinations as well. So it's a contributor. Tourism and hospitality contributes to those impacts, but it, as I say, it also is affected by them. So extreme weather and changing climate patterns have those impacts at destination level. And I think in common with other island destinations, you know, Jamaica will see those impacts in terms of sea level rises, etc., impacts on the water supply, both in terms of quality of the water and quantity available, coral bleaching, increased temperatures, you know, really affecting the length of the season that holidaymakers are comfortable visiting in. So all those things ultimately threaten the quality of the tourism product and customer experience and confidence in choosing the destination. So it's a crucial one really to take action on as businesses, and, you know, sort of play our part in that sense. So the Glasgow Declaration, the Travel Foundation was a founding partner of the declaration, which was launched almost exactly a year ago now at COP26 in Glasgow. And signatories to the declaration are really joining in to play their part in reaching this global commitment to halve emissions by 2030 and reach net zero as soon as possible before 2050. And then individually, anybody who signs up has committed to publish a climate action plan within the first year, and then to report each year on their progress against that plan. And in the last year, we've now got nearly 700 signatories to the declaration, so it's really gathered pace, and the effect of people collaborating and working together is really visible. So organisations, businesses, companies, DMOs, etc., really from around the world. You can see the Caribbean Tourism Organisation at the top there. Also the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association is a signatory as well. So the Glasgow Declaration sets out 5 pathways which kind of provide quite a useful framework. I think in particular climate action can feel quite daunting. It's something that businesses want to take action on and see the benefit of as well, in terms of cost reductions, of reducing energy use and resource use, but it's often quite hard to know where to start. So the 5 pathways provide, as I say, this kind of framework to take action. So the first one is measure. So what emissions are we producing from the energy and fuel, etc., that we use, and then to take steps to decarbonise, so to reduce those emissions through a variety of activities, which we'll have a look at in a minute. To regenerate, so helping visitors and communities experience better balance with nature. Collaborate, really important, particularly in the face of such a huge challenge, that we work together rather than compete. So we collaborate on projects, on sharing ideas, on sharing knowledge, etc. And then finance, ensuring resources and capacity are there in place, and that might be at a national level, but it's also relevant at business and destination level, I think, as well. So of those 5 pathways, for me, the first 3 really are what to do, what we need to do as businesses. And the the 4th and 5th are really how to do it. What we'll focus on today are those first 3 pathways. They measure, decarbonise and regenerate. And we'll just look at what each of those means for us as small and medium tourism businesses, and look at a variety of examples from other businesses around the world who are beginning to take action, and can provide hopefully some inspiration and ideas of how we might get started. So the first pathway is to measure. And this is probably the most complicated slide. It is a complex mechanism really for for assessing emissions. And so don't worry about getting too hung up on the different scopes at this point. This will be set out in a bit more detail in the manual that you'll get as well. So today we'll just go through it at a sort of top level, just to explain what the different scopes are and how those look for a sort of typical tourism business. But really getting a grip of what your business's emissions are is the first step, so that you can begin to measure. So the GHG greenhouse gas protocol categorises emissions into these 3 scopes. So scope 1 in the table there is the direct emissions from your business. So it's what you own and control. So it's the fuel or gas that you might use in your property or for your vehicles. If you generate any power on your site itself through a generator, for example, that would be scope 1. Possibly if you own a boat for boat trips, that kind of thing, and the fuel you use for that. So it's what you literally have within your control. Scope 2 is indirect emissions from purchased electricity. So any electricity that you effectively buy in for your property to power things like in-house laundry, lighting, heating, cooling, air conditioning, etc. Any appliances that you have on the property in an office, for example, or in a restaurant kitchen or a hotel kitchen. So any electricity that's purchased to power those would be scope 2. And then scope 3 effectively is everything else. So all the indirect emissions in your value chain. So kind of outside, much more outside your control, really. So that might be external services that you use, for example, laundry, waste disposal, etc. Food and beverage supply. Any travel, so your staff travelling to and from their place of work, or for example, tour buses. Customer travel to and in the destination, purchased goods and services, things like production of brochures and flyers, and any leased assets that you have. So that they tend to, scope 3 emissions tend to constitute the biggest source of your emissions often, but are often the most difficult to measure because they're outside your direct control. So for that reason, if you haven't started to measure any energy or fuel use yet, I would strongly suggest you focus on scope 1 and 2, because those are much easier to start to measure and start to monitor. So, for example, you could use your fuel receipts, your invoices for the purchase of gas, your meter readings. So it's much easier to make a start there. Start to ideally on a monthly basis, make a note of a record of what you're spending on fuel and gas and electricity and those meter readings, and then you can then record that and see how that's progressing over time. You can also use calculators to work out what the emissions are then relating to those fuels and electricity, etc. So this is just one example from St Lucia. So Jade Mountain Resort in St Lucia, in their business, they measure regularly consumption of electricity, and then they calculate the emissions using a calculator system that's available to them to calculate the emissions that are associated with that electricity. They also measure their consumption of water and also the energy that they save by harvesting and purifying water. They measure the consumption of gas, and then they use that data then to set reduction targets. So they look at what they've used over the course of, say, a year, and then they'll set their reduction targets for the coming year based on that. In terms of how you can calculate your emissions in particular, there are many tools out there, and again we'll highlight a couple of these in the manual that you'll receive, so I won't go into them in huge detail now, but here are a couple of examples. So this is the UN Environment Programme GHG emissions and resource efficiency tool, specifically designed for the tourism sector, for hotels and MICE businesses particularly. So this is a system where you can put in data about your emissions, but also your use of water and waste generation, and then you can monitor that over time. that then helps to build a baseline that you can then set targets from to improve over time and track your progress and you know, encourage your staff and all those things from the activities that you're undertaking. So that's one tool. And this is another tool that's not specific to the tourism industry, but it's another good tool for small businesses. It's quite accessible and easy to use. It's on the SME Climate Hub. So the link is there, but again, we will provide this information in the manual. But really it's about finding, I think, a simple mechanism that you can just get started with. I think that the most important thing is to make a start. And what I should have said about the pathways at the beginning is that they're designed to be pathways that you can follow at the same time. So you don't have to get everything perfect about your measurement before you start reducing. Just make a start to track your energy use, your fuel use, etc., so that you've got those records in place, but then actually take some steps to start to reduce, which is the next pathway. So the second pathway here is decarbonise. So this is really the action once you've set some processes in place to start measuring your resource use and your energy use, etc. You can then take some steps to begin to reduce it. So this can involve quite a wide spectrum of actions, really, and I'm conscious that some of these will cost more than others, but some are actually very low cost and even no cost to implement. So it's really, again, a case of starting from where you are, what you've got the resources to achieve, but particularly focusing, if this is the first time that you've started to think about this kind of thing, focusing on simple changes that you can make, switches that you can make in your operations that will make a difference straight away. So, for example, that might include changes in practice and efficiency measures. So that might be things like a switch off policy. So helping staff to know that they need to turn off lights and appliances, etc., when they're not in use, and also communicating with your guests to do the same. It might be using natural lighting instead of artificial lighting whenever you can. Controlling thermostats, so making sure that they're not on too strongly, obviously taking account of guest comfort, but just controlling that so that it's sort of as efficient as possible and not using excess electricity and energy. Lowering your laundry temperatures so that it still does the job, but you're not washing laundry at temperatures that are higher than necessary. Again, that's a really good way of cutting energy use. Things like for tour operators and drivers, ensuring appropriate vehicle sizes for groups, so making sure that you haven't got a minibus going out for 2 people when a car might be available instead, for example, and perhaps grouping deliveries so you're not constantly on the road or receiving deliveries every day, that perhaps you can group those deliveries, so again the fuel costs are lower. You might be able to make changes to your product or service itself. So a great change here would be to eliminate single-use plastics. And I know that Jamaica is already well ahead of many other destinations on this, but it's focusing, I think, on the changes that you could still make. So finding ways to reduce or eliminate single-use plastic bottles, for example, introducing a menu that is lower carbon, so perhaps more vegetables and vegetarian options, vegan options, and local procurement, so that you're not importing lots of products, but you're sourcing locally, again reducing the emissions from those deliveries. It might involve new equipment and technology. Again, this is something that may be higher cost, but it may also be, some lower cost changes. So if you are, for example, having to replace existing electronic equipment and appliances, making sure that the new equipment that you purchase is as energy efficient as possible. It might include things like an energy management system if you are refurbishing offices or accommodation. And again, those things can be expensive up front, but actually have a payback period, so that ultimately you're saving energy and costs. Also things like lighting and motion sensors, renewable energy systems, heat pumps, biogas generation, all those kind of technological changes that, as I say, may have an upfront cost, but have a do pay back over time. And thinking about the funding and finance session that we had last week, some of that may be relevant there, that if you're looking at kind of future proofing in the sense of investing in energy efficient technology and equipment, there may be finance that you could tap into there. And then finally, on this one, behaviour change. So actually involving your staff, it really links in with those changes in practice. So helping your staff to understand the contribution that they can make by just switching those behaviours, training them in the different practices, and also involving your customers as well. So explaining what you're trying to achieve as a business and helping them to get involved. They will be interested in hearing that because of their increased interest in sustainability and responsibility. They will be keen to know what you're doing and how they can support that. So here are just a few examples, and I've deliberately actually chosen some examples here that are in quite different destinations to Jamaica, just to show that this approach, it works for all different types of businesses, but also can be adapted depending on the destination and depending on the type of business that you're operating. So Hotel Awa in Chile is really going through some of those steps that I've just outlined. So it's, first of all, it's measuring its impact. So it's looking carefully at its energy and water use, travel, transportation, excursions, etc. The travel by its workers and energy use in its offices. It's looking at waste and the kind of materials it's using, food and beverage supplies, etc. So it's taking a sort of it's taking an approach where it's looking at the different areas of its operation and what it can do in each of those areas to decarbonise. And then in the French Alps, Alicats is a self-catering chalet business, and they're using much more of a process, a bit like the pathways of the Glasgow Declaration. So they're measuring, they're reducing, they're removing through some offsetting and communicating with their customers and others about what they're doing. And then Eternal Landscapes in Mongolia is a very small business. They have about 200 travellers a year, and they're very honest actually about what they're just doing what they can. They're conscious that they're limited by resources, but they say in their own words, we want to be a driver for behavioural change through setting a good example, promoting awareness and offering positive choices, therefore helping to make our small corner of the travel industry a better place. We don't pretend to get everything right, but we're committed to doing all we can to reduce our carbon footprint. So again, I think it's about starting where you are with what you have and taking those first steps and just moving on from there. It doesn't have to all be achieved straight away, but it's identifying what you can do and making a start. A much more local example next, Animal Farm and Nature Reserve is one of the businesses that we've been working with through the Big Up Small Business Booster Programme. And it's a farm and ecotourism attraction in Hanover, providing accommodation and farm tours. And just a few examples of how they use solar energy and save their resources as a business. They operate completely off the grid. They use solar panels, solar power, as you can see in the picture, for their electricity. They also generate biogas from animal waste from the farm for cooking and refrigeration, and they use compost instead of commercial fertilizers. So really, yeah, a great example of a local tourism attraction to decarbonise. And then the third pathway is regenerate. So this really is about protecting the natural environment, but actually more than that, it's actually putting back something positive into the natural environment and helping it to regenerate. So as a business, what could you do to support this? I mean, I think it's really obvious that Jamaica is famed for its natural beauty. It's a significant factor in holidaymakers' choice to visit, but it's also a fragile environment and it's vulnerable to negative impacts from tourism. So as businesses, I think you've got a really crucial role to play really in protecting that beautiful environment that people come to visit. So you could support nature-based solutions, for example, in your own community. You could look at ways that you could support projects, perhaps through staff volunteering or even through guest donations, for example, to manage, protect and restore ecosystems, you could partner, with local projects in that way. And it's also a way of supporting climate adaptation as well to the impacts that Jamaica will see. You can also, it's a really great thing to involve your guests and visitors in, really to help them form that connection to the environment that they're visiting, and appreciate the need to care for it and actually be involved in doing that themselves. I think another way, if you're operating tours, for example, there's a really important role there for tour operators and transport providers, etc., to plan tours in a way that respects the natural environment and considers the impacts. For example, you might, if you're running a boat tour, you might think about how you could reduce pollution, about how you could perhaps visit at quieter times of the day so that the waterway doesn't get overcrowded, and in that way you're also giving your customers a really unique experience as well. You're taking them away from the busyness and helping them to have a really peaceful, calm experience in the natural environment. So here are just a few examples, again, from other places around the world. This is from South Africa, a beautiful resort called Grootbos, which takes really positive steps, not just to protect the local area, but also to regenerate it. So it has planting schemes and regenerative agriculture schemes to protect many of these species, these local plants and birds and mammals, some of which are under threat of extinction. And as they say there, it's not just about conservation, they're deeply integrated and supportive within the ecosystem that they operate in as a business. And then this is another example from Malaysia this time. So this is a resort called Batu Batu, which has founded its own conservation body, which is focusing particularly on endangered sea turtles. So they've released almost 16,000 hatchlings, and then they take steps to support local people to patrol the area to prevent poaching. They're also working on beach cleans and making sure that the environment, the habitats really for the turtles are protected and regenerated. And they're also working with local school children as well to, again, engage that next generation in regeneration activities. And then this is an example which I'm sure many of you know far more about than I do, but I thought this was a really interesting example of a problem that is hopefully turning into a solution. So, as I'm sure you're aware, sargassum is a seaweed that I understand grows and kind of feeds on chemicals released into the ocean and sewage. And I think, in the areas that it's happening, clearly tourism is a factor in that. So almost similarly to climate change, tourism is contributing to this problem, but it's also vulnerable to it as well if it's reducing the attractiveness of the beaches and the appeal to customers. So there's that parallel there. But actually, what was interesting about this article that Coral and I found was that New Zealand scientists are exploring ways now to convert it into renewable energy and fertilizer. So I think that's a really great example of actually turning something that's a problem into a regenerative solution, because that actually will ultimately reduce emissions if they're able to do that, rather than it continuing to be a problem. So I'll watch that space with interest on that story. This is another local example from Jamaica. So Stush in the Bush, located in St Anne, practices sustainable and regenerative agriculture. They encourage customers to plant some seeds or a tree. They use the produce from their farm, obviously, to create that beautiful fine dining experience. And they also invite small craft producers from the community to be involved and able to access the market that way as well. So regeneration there is not just environmental, but actually including the community in that process as well. And community engagement is something we'll look at in a bit more detail in a moment. And then, still connected to the natural environment, animal welfare is something that customers are particularly aware of, I think, and keen to ensure that the trips and excursions, etc., that they go on are caring of animals and complying with animal welfare guidelines. So ABTA is the UK's outbound tourism industry body. They've produced a series of guidelines to help tourism businesses address these issues. And the first of those, so the blue one in the picture that you can see there, that's on their website free of charge for anyone to access. It's a really helpful resource. And as you'll see in their own research, 2/3 of people that they surveyed said they have concerns about the wider impacts of tourism and how animals are treated. So if you are operating an attraction or a tour that involves interaction either with wildlife or animals in captivity, it's really important that you understand and follow the guidelines that are issued. So ABTA's own words are quite helpful on this. I think it says, in many tourism destinations around the world, opportunities to view or interact with animals are commonly offered and very popular with holidaymakers. These experiences can be enjoyable, educational, and support conservation. However, where experiences are not carefully managed, they can jeopardise animal welfare and the holiday experience. While animal attractions are undoubtedly popular with customers, they want to be assured of good animal welfare standards. So it's really important that if you offer an attraction or tour involving interaction with wildlife, you know the standards with which you'll need to comply, and that you clearly communicate this and your responsible practices to customers and people who may do business with you. Obviously, if you're able to demonstrate and show your customers how you're caring for the animals that they're visiting, then that provides that reassurance that they're looking for, and they'll be really comfortable and happy to visit. So those guidelines, as I say, are available on the ABTA website, and we'll include the link to those in the manual that you'll receive as well. So just to finish off on this section, I know that's a lot of information to take in on the climate action front. The final two pathways are collaborate and finance. We'll look at collaborate later, because I think it covers actually a lot of these different areas that we'll be exploring today. There's scope for collaboration in all of them. And then in terms of finance, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's something in some ways at national level, obviously, financing things like renewable energy sources and that sort of thing is something at a more kind of government level, but also as businesses, that, you know, if there are things that you're looking to fund for your business, I would recommend looking at the preparing to access funding resources that from last week's session, which are on the Big Up Small Business website, and have a lot of practical information there as well. So I've been talking for a long time, and I'm sure you may have questions about what I've been talking about. So please do put anything in the question and answer box, and I'll be really happy to answer any at this point.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions yet, but if anyone, I don't know if you want to give a few seconds, a few minutes, sure, in case anyone thinks of anything that they may want to ask. Remember, we're not monitoring the chat, so if you have questions, post it in the Q&A segment box, and we'll answer them. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think perhaps everything is clear. But if anything comes up during the next segment of the presentation, feel free to just pop it in the box. We have another segment coming up, right, Rebecca? Another Q&A segment.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Right, so you'll get an opportunity to have those questions answered at that time.
Great, and if they relate to the climate action and energy reduction too, that's fine. If something pops into mind, you know, after this, that's absolutely fine. We can answer those at the end as well. So I'll move on. So we're on to the second of our 8 areas. As I said, the first one, climate action, was much bigger than the others in terms of the amount of information to cover. So the next 7 are much shorter, and we'll also look at some practical examples of these as well. So the next activity focus area in terms of future-proofing your business and sustainability is cutting your water use. So tourists and the businesses that serve them generally use significantly more water than local residents in destinations worldwide. And when that's coupled with the impacts of climate change, that can potentially threaten the quality and quantity of local water supplies. And tourism itself uses water resources for a huge range of services, really, from laundry and dishwashing to swimming pools and golf courses. And all these amenities and facilities for visitors attract them to the destination, of course. But we can also be responsible in the way that we use water, take steps to conserve it, and obviously to reduce costs by doing that without diminishing the quality of the customer experience. So again, the best way to start really is by measurement, because that means that we know where we're starting. So the best way ideally would be to measure monthly and make a record on a monthly basis of the water that you're using, either from your water meter by taking a regular reading, or from your water bills received. And if you have water meters in different parts of your business, so for example, if you're a hotel or a restaurant, if you have different water meters, it's really helpful to take those different readings and record them separately, because then you can see if one part of the business, for example, is using more water than another, and perhaps you know then that that's the area of your business to focus on first. So measuring is that first kind of crucial step, really, to work out what your starting point is, and then you can take steps again to reduce that. So what kind of things can you do to cut your water use down, and again to reduce the costs that you're paying for that water? There are probably 4 areas I think that we could focus on. So there's water saving devices. So for example, tap aerators that you can put in customer restrooms and bathrooms. You can get low flow shower heads, and also they're called hippos that you put in the cistern of the toilet that basically stops the cistern filling up with quite so much water. None of those things are particularly expensive, but they do save significant amounts of water and really don't affect the quality of the customer experience. I've used lots of taps with aerators, and it just feels exactly the same, looks exactly the same, but it is significantly reducing the volume of water that is used every time. So you're immediately finding ways then to cut the amount of water that you're using and cut down on your bills. Regular maintenance is another thing. So leaks can account for even up to 50% of indoor water consumption if you've got a leaky tap, a leaky toilet cistern, for example. So it's really important. Again, this is a no cost action really, to make sure that you're conducting regular checks on your water appliances. Train your staff to look for leaks and report them immediately, so that you can maintain them straight away. Even keep parts, in your replacement parts ready in your business if necessary, so that you can immediately replace those parts and make sure that the leak is stopped. Another way that you can reduce water is using grey or wastewater. So for example, for garden irrigation, you could use grey water, or even for flushing toilets potentially, rather than using clean water. So again, that's a way of reducing your bills and also the clean water that you're using. Another way would be using water butts in the garden to collect rainwater and then using that for irrigation. If you are watering plants or gardens on your property, making sure that you do that during cooler times of the day, so that plants soak up the water rather than it being evaporated. And then also involving your guests as well. Again, I think this is something that lots of businesses have been doing for quite some time now, but communicating with your guests about the precious resource that is water, and the fact that water shortages are a risk, and that that they can contribute to those efforts. So if you do have things, for example, like a linen change policy, a towel change policy, asking guests, for example, only to to either request a towel change or a linen change, or perhaps to put the towels in the shower or the bath if they want them changed. And it's also really important, I think, to back that up with staff training, so that they know what the system is and that they're confident that they don't have to change the linen. It's changing those, changing those habits really of automatically changing sheets and towels because they think that's offering a good guest experience, but actually sticking to what you're promising your guests, that you are taking steps to reduce that water use. And there's nothing more frustrating as a guest than kind of following those instructions and doing the right thing, and then you come back and the towels have been changed anyway. That's actually not good customer service. It's going against what you've asked them to do. So giving staff the confidence, I think, to carry out those practices and be confident that they're doing the right thing. The next of our actions is providing sustainable food and drink. Again, this is something that really taps into customer expectations as well. Customers are really keen to have, local, healthy, fresh food. So you're pushing kind of at an open door really by integrating sustainable food and drink into your offer. So that could be, if you're a hotel or an accommodation provider, if you're a restaurant or a food and drink provider, but also if you're a tour operator or agent as well, incorporating stops within those tours that really highlight local produce, whether that's a fruit stall by the side of the road on a tour excursion, or whether that's a great local restaurant that serves fresh local food. All of those things will be really welcomed, I think, by visitors looking for that authentic local experience, recognizing that Jamaican food is such a huge part of its culture and its tradition, and it's different and unique, really emphasizing those experiences to customers. It's also, of course, contributing to addressing climate impact. So all these things are related in many ways. So, for example, our current food system globally produces about 27% of greenhouse gas emissions, and up to 10% of that is from food waste. So taking action on even just things like portion sizes, trying to control portion sizes and make sure there's not so much waste. So perhaps thinking, for example, about buffet offers, would it be better and save on food waste, for example, to provide portioned options to the customers. So again, measurement is useful here again. So again, knowing where you're starting from is really helpful. So you could measure again monthly. You could monitor your food purchase invoices and keep a record of where they're sourced. So how local are you sourcing that food? Again, it's the kind of thing that customers are really interested in knowing. Here in the UK, I've been to a few restaurants recently where they have a map on the wall showing where their producers are located and how close they are to the actual business, so that you know that your food miles are really low. You know that you're eating produce that's been produced, a few miles down the road. It's a really powerful message, and one that customers are really interested in hearing. So perhaps mapping where you're getting your produce from, how much of it is local, where it comes from, using that to communicate with your customers as well. The stories of where their food comes from are really appealing to them. You could also record the types of food that you're offering, so the percentages of meat, for example, as opposed to vegetables, vegetarian options, and monitor how that's being received by your customers as well. Small menus are also short menus are also a great way of reducing waste. You could change that menu perhaps a bit more frequently, but again, finding ways to reduce ultimately the cost, because you won't be wasting as much, but also that's better for the environment and reducing carbon emissions as well. So these are just some of, sorry, I should have gone on to that slide before. So these are particular ways that you might think about sourcing your food and offering your food, but also I think really, as I just said, sharing those stories with your customers. They really want to know what they're eating, where it's from, who's produced it, how healthy it is, how good for the environment and the planet it is. So here are three examples from Jamaica. The first two, Far Out Fish Hut and Culture Market, are two of the other booster businesses that we're working with through the Big Up Small Business programme. All these businesses use locally sourced products. So Far Out Fish Hut and Culture Market source the products used in their menus from local farmers, and in the case of Far Out Fish Hut, from local fishermen. And Zimbali Retreats offers farm to table dining from items that they produce on their own farmlands. So they're really tapping into that customer interest in gastronomy, in local cuisine, in beautiful, healthy food, as you can see from those plates and from the picture of the garden there. That's something that customers, really want to see and experience. So this is a project moving a bit further away from Jamaica. This is a project that the Travel Foundation was involved in Cyprus. This is a few years ago now, but it's still going strong. It was the creation of the Cyprus Breakfast brand. And this was designed to celebrate and promote local gastronomic culture and heritage, and also to support local communities and small producers. So the idea is that hotels and restaurants that sign up to use this brand incorporate seasonal, local, traditional Cypriot dishes into their breakfast menus. So when guests see the Cyprus Breakfast brand, they know that that's what they're eating. They know that it's locally sourced, that it's sustainable, that it's seasonal and local, and they start to recognise that, because it's used in different businesses, so it's very much become that recognisable brand. And I guess it doesn't have to be breakfast; it could be another kind of local food brand. There's lots of other examples from destinations that are really, again, tapping into that trend that customers want to experience locally produced food. This is another Travel Foundation project. This one was in St. Lucia. I know that there was a similar issue that was addressed through a different project in Jamaica. And this is essentially looking at working on the issue of lionfish having been introduced into the Caribbean and multiplying rapidly with quite devastating results for native fish numbers. So the goal of this project was to reduce lionfish numbers by creating a demand for it to be eaten in local hotels and restaurants as a local delicacy, encouraging more fishermen to catch and sell it, and then improving their livelihoods at the same time. So fishers were trained in catching and preparing the fish. Obviously the spines are venomous, so they were given training in how to catch and prepare it, and given equipment such as ice boxes. And then there was also a communications campaign to encourage people to try lionfish, and it was hugely successful. Both residents, as in Jamaica, I know, were encouraged to increase their consumption and did do that. And actually for the fishers, the volume of their sales grew massively. It went from £400 and something a week to £1,400 a week, a 250% increase in sales. So there were lots of benefits. It was sustainable food, it was increasing local livelihoods, it was addressing the environmental impact of the lionfish being that sort of invasive species. And so there were multiple benefits of that sustainable food approach. Moving on to the fourth area of focus, managing waste. So as I'm sure you're aware that waste, obviously has many negative impacts. It threatens our human health, but it also threatens the health of wildlife and their habitats. It causes pollution. It's, obviously unsightly, and it's really impacts on the attractiveness of the destination. That can create a poor impression among holiday makers and potentially negative reviews. So it's an issue that's not unique to Jamaica by any means. Many destinations are looking at how to tackle this issue, particularly I think plastic bottles and the issue that they create, piling up if they're not recycled or disposed of. So again, the first step here is to measure, because again, you want to know what you're dealing with so that you can manage it and reduce it. So again, just create quite a simple system again, and you could use an Excel spreadsheet for all of these things. You could have a different tab, for energy, water, waste, etc. Doesn't need to be super complicated. So again, here, that simple system would be monthly, ideally, possibly even weekly. And what's important here is ideally that you would measure the waste from different areas of your business. So if you're a hotel, for example, you would measure the waste from your kitchen operations, and then from your guest rooms, and then from your housekeeping, for example, your public areas. Even within an office environment, you could do that. If you're a tour operator, you could measure the waste that's generated in your office, and then from the guests on your tours. So you're just monitoring which areas of your business is producing the most waste, so that you can focus on those first. You could either do that by literally the number of bags of waste that you're collecting every week or month, or you could do it by weight. But I think the most important thing is just to have a consistent system, so that you're doing that regularly, and so that you can compare across the areas of your business, and also week by week, month by month, but also so that you can be encouraged that you are making progress once you start to take steps to reduce it. So the three R's of waste production and disposal are to reduce, firstly. So you can do things like buying in bulk there, so avoiding things like single-use little condiment packets and that kind of thing. You could start to reduce your food waste, as we've mentioned already. So there's lots of ways, first of all, of just that's the most important step, really, is to cut your waste to a minimum, and then what you can't avoid, you would then reuse or recycle. So for reuse, for example, I think particularly here, something that would be great would be to encourage guests to use reusable water bottles. You might even want to provide those as a business, whether, when they arrive, perhaps to stay at your accommodation, or when they go on one of your tours, you could have a branded bottle. You could even have reusable ones that they use for the duration of their stay, and then they're sterilised. But again, it's that message that you're communicating to your customers, but also you're making a significant difference by doing that. We'll go into some more detail of examples in the manual of reusable items that you could replace those single-use items with. And then recycling. Again, providing facilities for staff and customers to separate and recycle. You could then potentially work with others, with other local businesses, to collect your waste and recycling, because I appreciate that's something that costs and something that takes time. So again, that collaboration element of working together. So for example, the Recycling Partners of Jamaica will collect waste for recycling once you reach a minimum weight. So perhaps by working with other local businesses to collect together, you can sort of ease the burden there. Okay, so this is an example from Chile this time. So Amity Tours, part of its climate action plan actually includes a goal to reduce its waste by at least 50% by the next season. And they're being quite innovative about that. So they're involving their guests in this. For example, this is their zero waste gourmet picnic. So they're making a positive experience out of it, which is really great to see. And then just a couple of examples here. We'll put these in the manual because I'm conscious of time. But these are two accommodation providers, but actually they're doing so much across their respective businesses that could be adopted by other businesses. So a lot of these initiatives could be implemented in offices for tour operators, or in restaurants and other premises. So just because they're accommodation providers, it doesn't mean that they're not kind of transferable examples, I think. So this is Bukute and Tara in Aruba. So they have solar panels providing 20% of their energy and water heating. Water reducers, as I mentioned earlier, they've managed to cut their water flow by 60%, which clearly will have an impact on the money they're spending on water resources. So that's a great result for them. They, as I mentioned earlier, treat and reuse wastewater. They purchase in bulk and use in-room dispensers. So instead of individual little toiletries in their rooms, they have locally produced toiletries in large dispensers that they just refill. They've got various energy saving equipment and technology, as you can see there. They have water canteens and coolers for guests, so guests can refill refillable water receptacles to use rather than having single-use plastic bottles. And they have what they call a sustainability concierge, so their guests can ask them about any of their sustainability initiatives and how they can get involved, which I thought was a nice touch. And then this is another global example from Jordan, so Feynan Eco Lodge, which is in a desert environment in Jordan. Again, very off-grid, 100% of their electricity is generated using solar panels, and they use very low energy electric lighting just in certain areas of the business. And what I like about this is they've kind of made it part of the experience. So that top picture, as you can see, that's a picture of the lodge at night. It's what guests see when they arrive at night. It's candle lit. The candles are made by community members on site. And so it makes it a really special experience. It doesn't, rather than environmental action having to feel like you're taking something away, it's actually a positive experience for guests. It's giving them something that's memorable, this beautiful candlelit lodge. They also use lots of sort of waste products for renewable purposes. So they use leftover food and waste for biogas. They also use this product called Gift, which is it's kind of a waste product from olive pressing that they use for fires in the evening, up to 90 evenings of the year when they do have some cool evenings. So again, it's very low energy, low impact. And the other thing they have is an entirely vegetarian menu. So again, reducing the carbon impacts of their food offering as well. And they make sure they are pretty remote. So they make sure that their food deliveries are just once a week. So again, they're not having lots of transport costs and emissions from that as well. Okay, so moving on to the next of the 8 areas, this is number 5, is diversifying your business. So this goes back to the point that we were thinking about at the beginning about increasing your business's resilience. And I think the last few years have demonstrated all too strongly the need to focus on that, coupled with the challenges of climate change and the impacts of the pandemic. It's really important, if you can, I think, to not put all your eggs in one basket, if at all possible. So this might include, for example, running your tourism business alongside another source of household income. So you might diversify in that way so that you're not only getting your income from tourism activities. It might be adapting to climate impacts by developing new products and services. You could provide reasons for guests to stay longer, so that the carbon intensity of their visit is lower because they're staying for longer, and so they're kind of making the most of that visit and really spending time in the destination. And in particular, appealing to the domestic market as an alternative source of revenue for your business. Tapping into the growing demand, I think, for local experiences by Jamaican residents, and also obviously reducing again the carbon impacts of your visitors by doing that, because there's no international flights involved in their visiting. And this is something that another of the booster businesses that we've been working with has really done successfully quite recently. So Nonsuch Falls is a nature attraction located outside Port Antonio. It's the site of the tallest waterfall in Jamaica. And they offer tours and other activities that showcase the natural environment where they're located, as you can see that beautiful view. And they've been able to diversify their market and appeal to the domestic market through developing new products and activities that are designed to appeal both to international and domestic tourists. And their latest offering is the introduction of a campsite that enables patrons to experience sleeping outdoors in tents in the natural surroundings. And they've also introduced activities such as axe throwing. So they've really diversified. They've still got the beautiful waterfall is the key attraction there, the hiking, the other outdoor activities, but they've been able to add to that and tap into the demand for those sort of active experiences and the camping offer. That's been so successful that they've had to expand the area of the site dedicated to camping. So that's a really successful example of diversifying their business. The sixth area of the 8 is supporting your local economy. Buying locally, as I'm sure you're more than aware, is crucial. It enables local individuals, businesses and communities to get the maximum benefit from tourism. It also really helps to make your business different and special. It helps you improve quality, and it helps you make the experience memorable for your customers. And really there's endless potential. Local suppliers can provide food, crafts, artwork, souvenirs, soft furnishings, handmade soaps, staff uniforms and more. So there's lots of ways that you can engage with local suppliers and really make their products part of what you offer as a business. So in terms of what you can do, you can source locally, you can look for local producers, cooperatives, etc. You can work with those suppliers so they understand what you need as a business, and perhaps they can tailor what they're producing to suit what you need. They can make sure, for example, that they're supplying enough food weekly to meet the supply that you need. They might produce particular artwork to suit the kind of style of premises that you need it for. So really engaging with those suppliers and working out how you can work together, including traditional dishes and drinks on your menu, as we've already mentioned. Promoting local culture, you could have themed evenings, traditional entertainment for guests, making sure that it's really authentic and it's something that they can engage with. You could host a souvenir market, you could have craft producers invited to the property, or if you're a tour operator, you can make sure that you're incorporating those local producers into your itineraries, whether that's craft producers or food stalls or local restaurants, etc., local attractions. Just really working out how you can maximise that benefit to the local economy. And just a couple of examples from tour operators of doing that. So the TUI Collection portfolio of excursions are designed to be unique, authentic and responsible excursions. They place sustainability at their heart, aiming to benefit local communities and minimise environmental impact. And they have very specific criteria for sustainability. So they work with their suppliers to make sure that they manage their environmental impacts. They want them to include visits to protected areas or cultural attractions as part of the excursions. They need to offer local cuisine, local products, opportunities for customers to buy local products. They must have fair employment practices, make sure that children are safeguarded and that animal welfare guidelines are followed. So that's an example of a careful process really to make sure that those excursions are put together to maximise those local benefits. And then G Adventures Ripple Score. This was introduced in 2018 as a means of transparently showing how much of travellers' money was staying in the local economy. Again, responding, I think, to that customer trend of wanting to know that their holidays are benefiting local people and not having a negative impact. So the way they did it was to look at all in-destination expenditure. So all the money that G Adventures spends on excursions in the destination, they then looked at that across everything that constituted that trip. So that was accommodation, transport, guiding, restaurants, etc. And they audited each of those trips, over 640 of them, and then they gave each of those a score representing the percentage of money spent in destination that remains with a locally owned business. So of the money spent in destination, how much of that was spent with local businesses, and across those tours, there was an average Ripple score of 93. So 93% of the money spent in destination was going to local businesses and services. So that is a transparent way of showing customers how much of what they're spending is actually benefiting people locally. And I appreciate that these are big operators, but actually the principles, are similar, really. I think even for smaller tour operators putting trips together, breaking down of the total excursion cost. You know, what is going to local businesses? Are there gaps there? You know, is there another stop that could be included perhaps to enhance that local benefit? So it's being quite methodical about the tours as they're put together and working out how to maximise that benefit. That might be, for example, stopping at a different restaurant. You know, if you run a tour twice a week, you might stop at 2 different restaurants on each of those times so that you're spreading that benefit between those restaurants. Or you might stop at a different fruit stall for a juice, for example, or you might offer a different craft producer an opportunity to come and show their products at the end of the tour. So it's thinking strategically about how you can maximise those local benefits for local businesses. This is an example again from Jamaica, again of one of the small businesses that we're working with as part of the Big Up Small Business Booster Programme. So the managers of the Jamaica Conservation Development Trust are the managers of the Blue and John Crow Mountains National Park. They also operate the recreation areas of Holywell and Portland Gap Peak and the trails. And they've been engaged with the communities around the national park to help them benefit from tourism. They've been working with those communities to identify what's available in the communities that might appeal to visitors, working out crucially what they're happy to share with those visitors, and helping them to develop curated packages for cross-marketing. This is another example of a previous, or in fact 2 projects that the Travel Foundation has run in Turkey. They're both extra food examples, but actually I think the principles could transfer across to craft producers or art producers, etc., because it's really about connecting those small local suppliers to large hotel chains. So the first of those, Taste of Fethiye, was working with farmers and wholesalers to connect them with hotels to help them source their local produce in a commercially viable way. So they again created a logo a little bit like the Cyprus Breakfast logo, so that visitors would start to recognise this. They would know that when they were eating this produce at their hotels or restaurants, that they were eating local fresh produce. And through that project, the local farmers increased their revenue by 24%. So through connecting with that kind of mainstream hotel and tourism industry, they were able to increase their revenue. This was followed on by a more recent project. So the picture on the right is a picture from our project called Flavours from the Fields. So this was building on that, really, linking hotels and producers of processed and packaged goods like olive oil and honey and jam. So working with cooperatives to help them be able to build enough capacity to meet hotel demands, etc. And then working with the hotels on their procurement practices to link them with those producers and create contracts and ensure that consistency of supply, etc. So as I say, I think that's something that could be potentially replicated either with food producers, but also with, you know, other local suppliers of different products. This is an example from Namibia. So Casa Anin is a local cooperative, really. It's a social enterprise working with local women and to produce these beautiful handmade linen items, and they provide them to the hospitality industry. And when you're staying in many of the properties in Namibia, you start to see the same linen on the beds and in the bathrooms, and the, you know, beautifully hand embroidered linen, and then it's offered for sale. So actually people are able to take a piece home almost of their holiday experience, because they've you know, got used to seeing these beautiful products, cushion covers, etc., etc., and then, you know, they're able to take them home as a souvenir. So the other example, the other thing they do is they're involved in a shopping experience that a tour operator called And Beyond offers. So And Beyond takes their customers on a sort of curated shopping experience where they take them to different producers. So that includes the Casa Anin Embroidery Centre, a craft centre producing basket work and beaded crafts and wood carvings, etc., and a carpet producer. So again, I think this is something that you know, could be replicated. You know, items that hotels and other businesses might be able to, you know, source beautiful artwork, soft furnishings, a variety of products that local producers could provide that could then be offered for sale to the guests and customers as well. And again, that's not just for hotels, that's potential for restaurants and food and drink providers as well as tour operators, again integrating visits to artisans and producers in their itineraries. Moving on to the almost last but one element of our actions to focus on. So number 7 is around creating a safe and happy place to work. So it's a real differentiator, I think, for businesses that create a great environment to work in. Well rewarded and motivated staff always deliver a great service and customer experience. You can always see as a customer when somebody really enjoys their job and it's memorable, it makes that experience special. So good working practices help to recruit and retain high quality people. It helps you increase productivity, and it obviously reduces recruitment and training costs if your staff stay with you over a long period of time. So important things to focus on here would be making sure that your salary scales are in line with market rates. Offer your staff opportunities for progression, so whether that's developing new skills like language courses, mentoring schemes, etc. Benefits like free meals and transport and laundry services, and really involve them, I think, in decisions around the business as well, particularly around sustainability. They can see the impact, the positive impacts that your business is having, and they can have a stake in that. They can get involved in coming up with ideas, championing the different changes that your business is making. It makes them loyal, it makes them invested in your business success. So yeah, involving them in those initiatives too. And yeah, offering untypical benefits like flexible hours if that's possible, job sharing, working with people to make those jobs work well for them. Again, that increases the likelihood that they will stick with you. The booster businesses that we've been working with have really been using the training and guidance that they've received through the Big Up Small Business programme to help their staff develop new skills and confidence. None Such Falls, for example, that we looked at earlier with the camping product, have utilised the tools really well with their staff to train them, give them additional knowledge to help them provide excellent customer service. And they've told us that actually the online reviews that they've received have really reflected that and created that kind of happy environment for the staff to work in, and customers are noticing that. So that's really encouraging. So finally, the final area to look at is caring for your local community. So I think it's important to remember really that the voices of local communities can often kind of go unheard in tourism. Often they kind of bear some of the negative impacts of tourism, but don't always see enough of the benefits. But on the other hand, those communities that do see benefits from tourism really will offer that warm welcome to visitors and provide authentic and memorable experiences for them. Tourists are really looking for travel experiences that give something back to the local community. So as well as employing local staff, identifying opportunities for training and upskilling local people, what ways could you find of forging additional links with your local community? So for example, the Rastafari Indigenous Village opens up opportunities for members of the local community to participate in the business and benefit from it. So you could think about, hosting local community activities. You could potentially donate funds to local community groups that are working on particular issues. Perhaps there might be excess food produced by your business, your hotel or restaurant or other business that might go to waste that you could donate to local charities. You could also offer space, for example, for local artisans and artists to display and sell their work in your premises or through your business. You could offer training and apprenticeship opportunities. Again, local staff. We were just thinking about involving staff, but actually, staff from the local community will be even more invested in your business success if they're local to it and they see it thriving. And perhaps you could offer local community members opportunities to use your facilities, perhaps on quiet days or quiet periods of the year, to offer something back for the fact that they're welcoming visitors to their local area. I think the most important thing as well is to work with the local community. in the places where your business is located, or perhaps where you take visitors if you're a tour operator. So really making sure that they're first of all happy to welcome guests, working and engaging with those local communities, consulting them about whether they would like to receive visitors, making sure that they fully understand what that will entail. If they do, then working to develop that experience together with them, making sure that they really will see a tangible benefit. So they're not just having visitors to them with no involvement from them or no benefit, but they're actually actively receiving guests and welcoming them and hosting them. And as I say, receiving that tangible benefit. So that could be financial contributions, local economy development opportunities, that kind of thing. And I think crucially making sure that daily life isn't intruded on and interrupted by the presence of visitors, including ensuring that children are safeguarded. So avoiding visits to schools, for example, making sure that children aren't missing school to engage with tourists, whether that's by working in a business or informally, and making sure that guides are supported, I think, as well, to reinforce those messages about appropriate behaviour when they visit local communities. So this is I've just got a couple more examples before we finish. So this is obviously a very local one. Again, another of the booster businesses that we've been working with through the Big Up Small Business programme. This is Trenchtown Ceramics and Art Centre. It's a social enterprise which operates an art and craft production facility in the inner city community of Trenchtown in Kingston. They produce ceramic products retailed around Jamaica. They offer tours of the facility and they conduct workshops. And they have a community development outreach programme, which is really amazing. It's heavily involved in fostering children and young people with an interest in art and ceramics creation. And by engaging those youths from the community, teaching them the skill of ceramic production, they're providing an outlet for them to be productive and involved in something successful. And the clay that's used to produce the items is also sourced locally from that same community. So it's really invested as a social enterprise in the benefits that it's generating for the community right around it where it's operating. This is another example from India this time, so it's reality tours and travel, and this is really about the point I was making about community engagement. So there is a very small tour operator based in Mumbai and Delhi. Their aim is to give guests an authentic and educational experience, but they also conduct regular interviews with representatives of the communities who live in the places that the tours visit, to make sure that they're not experiencing negative impacts, and then also to act on anything that the community wants them to change. It's very much co-created with those communities to make sure that they're happy and benefiting and not being negatively impacted by those tours. 80% of the tour profits and 100% of merchandise profits then fund an NGO to support education, skills, art and sport programmes in those communities. So again, really investing in making sure that the communities that really are the reason for those visitors taking those tours, making sure that those communities are benefiting. So finally, just two more points to make. Firstly, about collaborating. So when taking action on things like carbon emissions and waste, really focusing on collaboration rather than competition is the key here. So it can help you, working together can help you make savings and reduce your environmental impact. So for example, you could coordinate deliveries with other local businesses. You could work together to collect and recycle waste. You could work together to support community and regeneration projects. Again, those things are often more impactful if they're done together and in a coordinated way. And you could investigate whether bigger investments could be pooled, for example. So could you share, solar power installations perhaps with a neighbouring property and share the cost? So really encourage you to work together and collaborate with others. And then finally, communicate. Don't forget to tell your customers and tour operators about the stories of positive impacts that your business is having locally, and the steps that you're taking to protect the environment, etc. You could do that through social media, through your website. You could do that through sustainability accreditation. You could include information in your customer communications as well. So that might be on your menu or on your tour itinerary or in the guest room information. You know, really make sure that you're telling those positive stories. Don't assume that people will just notice or know. You know, do shout about them and share those stories. Okay, so finally, what can you get started on? All of these potential areas, I know there's a lot to think about. It's been a lot to take in. And there is even more detail in the manual that we will share. So that is something that you can go through, you know, at your leisure and kind of work out really what makes most sense for your business at this point in time. And our suggestion is that you take maybe 3 or 4 areas just to make a start on, maybe start measuring a few of those things, take some early steps, take some first steps on what you can do to reduce perhaps water or waste, or ways that you could start to support the local economy by connecting with other small businesses. We would suggest that climate action is a must, so that probably needs to be one of your 3 or 4, just because it is such a huge issue and a threat really to our industry and to our businesses. So reducing carbon emissions and taking steps to protect the environment, I would suggest is definitely top of your list. But then, you know, alongside that, what other 2 or 3 could you focus on? And again, just remember, don't let kind of pursuit of perfection stop you just making a start. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just really important to make a start on what you can do with the resources you've got, and things will build from there. And you're probably already doing more than you think as well, so don't be daunted. You know, there are plenty of steps that you can get started on. When you and make a plan as well. That will make it more manageable as well, if you just maybe list out, you know, some early steps that you want to take. And other resources from our previous webinar series and manuals will also be helpful, I think. So there's lots of information on there that's still really relevant on market trends, health and safety, pricing, how to access the market, and so on. So do go to the Big Up Small Business website and access those resources as well. Watch the recordings and download the manuals, because there's lots of really useful information in there too. And that's it. Thank you very much for your patience. I know that was a lot of information to go through. I think there are a few questions I haven't looked yet in the Q&A box, but
yes,
I'm very happy to answer.
Okay, so we've got one question here that says, I'm in the makeup, and I think she means makeup business, and about to start a loan business. Are there any suggestions on how to make my businesses more sustainable?
Okay, I don't know too much about either of those sectors, I'm afraid. But I guess for any business, certainly resource efficiency, looking at, you know, your premises, your energy use, your water use, all of those things are still relevant to any business. On the loan aspect, I'm not so confident in answering that. Jonathan, who's joining us later, we'll have some input on that from his perspective. But I would say probably to focus on your premises to start off with. I guess as I say, it's not my specialism, but thinking about a makeup business, I guess making sure that those products are ethically produced. Again, you know, customers will be really keen to know that that the products are ethically sourced and produced, both in terms of things like animal welfare, but also environmental impact. So yeah, those would be my suggestions on where to start on that.
Okay, thanks. And then the other question is, can you please speak about what we need to know about water tanks and how to obtain one?
Okay, I think that's probably about the water butts and, you know, using the grey water and wastewater. I don't know from not personal knowledge now, but I'm sure that's something we could find out and provide some information on. I don't know whether they would need to be imported to Jamaica or whether there's a manufacturer in Jamaica, but we can certainly
recommend
have a look into that, and provide some information.
Yeah, so we can do some research and send that. That was from Jennifer, so we can send her the response to that.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, and then we have one other question, two more. We have, hello, thanks for the wonderful presentation. We have communicated to our guests about precious water use, etc., and that we're moving toward water harvesting. There is still an upset perceived when we suggest not filling our very large in-hot tubs, even when we promote a natural jacuzzi experience on our beach. Do you think it is a good idea to charge more dollars if they insist and wish to fill the bathtubs?
Wow, it's a tricky question, because I guess from the customer point of view, if those facilities are provided, then they will expect them to be filled. I don't know if it's an option to take them out, but if it isn't, then it's possible. I think it's very much in the communication. So I think you would need to be very clear about why you were charging more and the reasons, you know, about water being such a precious resource. You could potentially offer to, you know, for that money to then go to a local conservation project, for example. So there's a clear link between, you know, environmental benefit that is contributing to, for example. It is a really tricky one in terms of charging extra, but I think if you're providing a clear reason, then it's not impossible, but it's all about the communication, I think, and explaining why that's being done.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking that perhaps if there's a way of using the gray water from the tubs, have it using that for, you know, watering your plants and so on. I don't know if there's a way to recycle that water so that at least it doesn't go to waste.
Yes, that's true. That's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The other one, Anita says, thanks, appreciate the response. That was the first question. There's another question that asked, last week's session, the presenter mentioned that we would get a manual. Would this be on the website as well?
Yes, it is. So on the Big Up Small Business website, I'll share, once I've stopped sharing my screen, I'll share the link to both these resources from this series, but also the one I just mentioned as well about the recovery webinars and manuals as well. So each week we're adding the recording of the session and the manual. So there's, at the moment, there's this on the one I'll share in a moment, there are the 3 weeks recordings and manuals. So the ones on business structure and bookkeeping, and then on business planning, and then on the preparing to access funding. So they're there already, and then as of early next week, this recording and manual will be there as well. So they'll all be in that one place. So I'll share that in a minute.
Great, thanks. And then we have another. I know that you mentioned about energy conservation and things you can do to reduce energy consumption, for example, changing out your old appliances to the new energy saving ones. Business is on the very low for most people. What other way can be suggested to reduce energy other than changing something that is working?
Sure. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't suggest replacing something that's working, you know, unless there's a good reason to do so. So absolutely, it's more, I think, if you're in need of replacing something, then look for the most energy efficient new model to replace that. I think in terms of reducing energy without, you know, for low cost, I think it's very much around, you know, changes in practices that are going to help you do that. So switch off policies, you know, can save more than people think. I think, you know, by just making sure that no lighting or appliances are left on when they don't need to be, even on standby, you know, just making sure that everything is switched off, working with your guests to do that as well. You know, I don't know what type of business, but you know, the person operates, but that, you know, it applies to all businesses really, whether that's hotels and making sure that nothing is left on in guest rooms, you know, when guests are not in the room, or whether it's, you know, restaurant kitchens, or, you know, even vehicles, you know, don't run the engine to run the aircon, you know, before you go. I know that can be a common practice. So just, you know, real changes in behavior that don't cost anything can really make a difference. So yeah, it's very much about efficiently running what you've got as well.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. I don't see any more questions, so I think we can move on.
Thank you. Great.
Will you share?
Oh, sorry, I should be still sharing. Great.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Now we're going to be joined by our very special guest. He's going to tell us a bit about the On Tours Foundation and the opportunities that they offer to tourism businesses that champion sustainability. Jonathan Coleman is our special guest, and he is co-CEO of the On Tours Foundation, which invests 100% of its endowment directly into world-changing companies and helps other foundations do the same. The foundation also owns On Tours, which is a global travel company and the world's first ever certified B Corporation. Jonathan has built his career around the work of supporting equitable entrepreneurship ecosystems and integrating the concepts of impact and social good into business operations. In pursuit of these goals, he has lived and worked in the USA, Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa. Jonathan holds an MBA in International Economic Development, is fluent in Spanish, and was chosen as a global shaper by the World Economic Forum and an ELM Fellow by the Aspen Institute. He's also the co-founder of social enterprise travel company International Tours, along with his wife, Kate. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Coral, for the intro. Yeah, it's really great to be here for just a few minutes to introduce what we have happening at the On Tours Foundation and let you know how maybe you can access some of the resources that we're developing. Quickly, just to build off of what Coral said in her intro, we have at the On Tours Foundation, we're unique in that we're an NGO or a nonprofit or a foundation, but we own a for-profit entity called On Tours. And so it's a for-profit business, but it operates with the principles of sustainability and community betterment. It kind of embedded into how the business operates and has been that way from the very beginning. But we take those profits from the company and from other funders that join us, and they go to the foundation. So 100% of the profits come straight up to the foundation, and we try to do good work supporting entrepreneurs around the world with that money. So that is my primary job is to figure out, to find these businesses that are doing amazing things around the world and give them the capital they need to do more of it, to grow their business and grow their impact. So the foundation's been around for 30 years doing this kind of thing. But the interesting thing is, while we were born out of a travel company and now we own that travel company, we actually never invested in travel or supported travel companies specifically. We supported entrepreneurs of all types and all industries, but not travel specifically. So we're changing that now. And we've created a fund called the Reset Tourism Fund that is supporting specifically tourism-related businesses around the world. And as always, with the businesses we support, it's not just industry, but it's also the way they operate. So tourism businesses that have an impact model or have a community or environmental impact focus of their business. So we've been getting this off the ground for about a year now, and it's really ready to roll now. So we have some capital available to put out into the world, into these businesses, and we're starting to do that. So just briefly to talk about the types of investments that we'll make with this fund. It will mostly be loans. We can take some other form of investments at some level, but it will mostly be loans that we offer. And the idea is that we're offering loans. They will have an interest rate connected to them, but they will be lower, hopefully, than the standard market rate in any given country. So we're trying to provide extra benefit by providing low interest loans. We also plan to be much more flexible than maybe traditional lenders would be. Sometimes maybe we'll do revenue-based repayments. So you would repay as a percentage of your revenue instead of as just principal and interest payment each month, which is much better for tourism businesses because of the fluctuations in your cycles through the year of business. So yeah, we try to provide this capital in ways that is flexible and is affordable and accessible, again, for these best in class businesses that are both have a business model that financially makes sense and is profitable and is also can pay us back because we need that, but also that it has a really clear and definable impact on local community or environment or some combination of those things. The loan sizes will be anywhere between $10,000 and $100,000. So it would depend on just US dollars. It would depend on business size and capacity to handle that the level of funding and capacity to repay. And the repayment terms would be anywhere between like 1 and 3 years of repayment, depending again on the different factors. So it all depends on the individual situations, and we structure each opportunity differently depending on the business that we're working with. So that's the basic overview. Again, we're trying to bring capital together, some money together, some of ours, some from others, to grow a much bigger pot of money that we can then invest in businesses like yours that are doing amazing things, but they just need some help to take the next level of growth. And we want to be part of that. We want to be the jet fuel to your amazing things that you're doing. You just need a bit of fuel to really take off, and that's the role we want to play. So with that, I'll stop. That's the basic overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions here for a few minutes.
Not seeing any questions yet. If you have any questions for Jonathan, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A.
And one thing I will do also is put the link to the overview in the chat here. Let me just, I'm looking at my other screen here to pull it up quickly. So I'll put that in the chat so you can see and see what we're asking for. And of course you can apply if you're interested. So let's see here. Hopefully you can see that here, and ignore some of the formatting. We have a new website coming online in the next week or two. And so some of the formatting is a bit funky on this application, but that's because the new one's on its way. So just please ignore that.
Okay, we've got a question.
Okay.
They're asking what is the deadline and criteria?
Deadline is, it's rolling. There's no deadline. As we have money available to lend, we will lend it, and we have some now. So yeah, if you're interested, go ahead and apply. As far as criteria, you'll see it on the application. You'll see the questions we ask. We're not necessarily setting any like distinct criteria, other than you need to be a business that has both a positive financial model, meaning your business has customers and they're paying you for things, and you have revenue and you're making a profit, or you have a path to making a profit eventually. So we need that, like a solid business model mixed with a solid impact model, so that you have a business that is really clearly making your community better, making your environment better through the business activities. So those are the two things we're looking for, without kind of giving really specific answers, but kind of as in the broad buckets, we want those businesses that are doing both of those things really well. And then that's what we'd like to support.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we invited you to speak this week, Jonathan, was it really brings together what we were looking at last week. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the businesses preparing to access funding and knowing what they need to have in place, to make funding applications, assessing what they need as businesses, whether they need it right now, whether they need it in 6 months, etc. So, I definitely say, look at that as businesses and work out, what you need and when, but then also bringing to obviously very much together with what we've been looking at today, and those, it's not just any business, it's businesses, mm-hmm. actively, positively impacting, the local communities and the environment. So that's why, we saved you for this week, really, to mm-hmm. kind of bring those two things together.
Yeah, that's a perfect combination to have. And, ideally what we're trying to do also, just in talking about combining those things, but specifically the impact side, is we're trying to make it more financially viable for you to do all of those good things. And so if we can give you some capital that's more affordable and more flexible to help you grow, that we're kind of incentivizing that good behavior you're already doing. And that's what we like, because we want every business, tourism and not, we want every business to do this good stuff and to use their business in this positive way, and to view their business as a tool, not just for making money, but also for making impact. So we want to incentivize that and help those businesses that are doing it, so that the others follow behind.
Wonderful. We've got another question. As a nonprofit organization, how much would you prepare to contribute?
Yeah, so the question is around if we were to make a loan or contribution to a nonprofit organization? Is that, what would that look
How
like?
much? I think the question is asking how much, whether you have a maximum amount that you're willing to contribute to the businesses.
Okay, yeah, so
And just so if I'm wrong, I think the person who asked that question, if I'm wrong, can you please clarify?
okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I think we can go up to $100,000 for loans, but if it's for smaller businesses, it will most likely be much smaller than that, in the 10 to 30,000 US dollar range. So that's kind of the dollar range. But also, many people ask about nonprofits. So we talk about businesses, and we're giving loans to businesses, and sometimes NGOs and nonprofits are also doing some type of business, specifically with tourism, as part of their work. And for us, that's great. We can make a loan to a nonprofit organization or NGO. They just need to be one that is not just relying on donors, but that have a business, has some revenue that's coming in. You're selling something or some service that is part of your revenue streams, and that's what we look at when we're making a loan. Not necessarily like the fundraising part, but the business activities of the NGO.
Great. Hopefully that answered the question. And then the other question was asking if there's a maximum amount, which you've just answered as well. There is one other question that came in. It's asking if you require security, like lien on land or so on. I think, collateral.
No, we're not taking right now. We're not taking security. Yeah, so that's, I forgot to mention it, but another reason that these are good loans for you, for the business owners, because we're not taking liens or securities for these. So of course that's riskier for us, but and we have to be a bit picky because of that, and we have to make sure that the business is solid. But it also means that you don't have your property tied up in these things, or you have opportunities to tie up your property for other things that will be helpful for your business. So we're not kind of bogging down the businesses in that way. So it's part of the impact we're trying to have, is to be a bit more flexible with that.
Great. Don't think I'm not seeing any other questions. There's one in the chat. I think it's asking, how do we access the funds?
Yeah, so if you go to the link that I put in the chat here, there's an application there, so you can fill out the application and we'll take it from there. We would reach out. So the application has a lot of information that we ask for, and then we would take that information and reach out with next steps. So we would then process it through our own analysis to see if it's a good fit and let you know, and then or ask more questions if we need some more details.
Excellent. I'm sorry, I muted myself accidentally. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think that was really useful. And people, if you do go on the website, there's a lot of information available on the website about the opportunities that exist with the OnTours Foundation and how it works. And of course, you can always reach out to us. You can reach out to me, Rebecca, if you need additional information or if you have any questions. Is it okay to share your contact information as well, Jonathan?
Sure, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. So we can share that with you when we send out the information for the manual and the Zoom recording as well. So thanks a lot, Jonathan. I think this works very well with what we did last week, as Rebecca said, and the information that Rebecca gave this week regarding sustainability and so on. So really timely. Thank you a lot.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here, and I hope to see some applications or some emails from some of you soon. We would love to support some businesses in Jamaica. So yeah, please reach out.
Great.
Oh, thank you. Before you go, there's one other question I'm looking at. Sorry, I'm looking at my second screen here. Looking at the website, it does not say where you're based. How would money reach into the Jamaican system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we would do a bank transfer. We're based in the US. We would do a bank transfer. And then we're working with a payment processing partner to help process the repayments back. That keeps the cost low. So there's still some costs, but they're much lower for the repayments. So that's how we're doing that.
Okay, hopefully that answers that. So we'll send an email. I think this person is saying yes. We'll share the email address so that if you have questions, you can send an email to Jonathan. And there is one other question that's asking what interest rate do you work with? I think is what it's asking.
Yeah.
What are your interest rates currently?
Yeah, it's very flexible. It depends on the situation. So yeah, I don't like to before I see the details give a specific rate, but I think you can be very confident that it will be, you know, substantially lower than like local bank rates. That's what we're trying to do certainly for an unsecured loan. So we're trying to be, you know, have the extra level of benefit by being much cheaper. So we need to charge some interest because we need to cover our own costs, but we're not trying to make money beyond that. We just want to cover our expenses. So yeah, so it depends on the situation, but it's you know, more affordable than you'll find most other places, almost any other place.
Okay. And is it something that you work with, it differs for individual businesses? Do you work with them on a one-to-one basis in terms of determining what their ability is to repay?
Yeah, we'll look at each individual application and also if we needed more information, we usually do, and we'll ask for more detailed information. And then we work with them to make a decision. I mean, to get the information we need to then make a decision. Okay, is this going to work or not for us? And if not, then we say, okay, here's why. We can't do it this time because of this reason or this reason. But if you can fix these areas, then come back to us and we can talk again. So yeah, we work with everyone who applies in that way.
Okay, so quite flexible. There's a question that's asking if manuals are sent to the email addresses. Yes, so it's the email address that you registered with for the webinar that the manuals are sent to.
I'll also put the links in the chat in a moment as well.
Okay, great. And then thank you. I would love to follow up with the email address. So we'll share Jonathan's email address at when Rebecca sends out the information, the manual and so on for the webinar. You'll also get that contact information. I think that's it. I'm not seeing. I think there's, oh, it's just chat, sorry. I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A. Let me just see if this is a chat. If the question in the chat, thank you, it has been helpful. I would also suggest that Rebecca looks into the issues of security and response with the Jamaica situation, in particular for eco-environment situations. So I think it's a question for you, Rebecca, in terms of the security issues I think they're asking. I don't know if you'd love to add anything to that. I'm
not sure what that's referring to. Sorry, let me just look at the question. I can't see the questions for some reason.
It's actually in chat.
Oh, it's in chat.
Yeah. I'm not sure either, but it says it would suggest that Rebecca looks at issues of security and response with the Jamaican situation, in particular for eco-environment situations. Not sure what that
is. Is that maybe around security issues for rural locations? Maybe is that the for remote issues? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think some of that was potentially covered in the recovery manual around health and safety and security. So that's worth looking at as well. I'm just about to put that link in the chat as well. But yes, I mean, that is certainly an issue. And that's part of responsibility actually, is looking after the safety of your guests. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's definitely a consideration, is making sure that your local community is safe, but also and also your guests as well. So yeah, that's, as you say, definitely an important factor.
Certainly.
I'm just sharing the links for the previous resources and for the current manuals and recordings as well. So those are both in the chat. Perfect.
Thank you. And if anything else comes up, I mean, in terms of with regard to Rebecca's presentation as well, that you need further clarity on, or have any other questions, if after the webinar, you can always email us and we will respond as well. So I want to thank Jonathan for really providing us with that alternative option for our small businesses. And thanks to Rebecca as well for providing the information on sustainability that she did earlier. We really are hoping that you're finding and that you found today's session educational and informative, and that you'll be able to utilize the learnings that you've been getting to make positive changes in your businesses. So look out for the manual that's going to be coming to you in an email with the link to the manual and the recording, as well as the contact information for Jonathan. And before we end, I'm just going to ask that you join us again next week. Next week, Thursday, my bad. The 3rd of November, we're going to be doing the session on digital marketing. And that session is really going to be very informative. I think that's not one you want to miss. You're going to learn how to promote your tourism businesses, how to maximize your marketing using websites, SEO, social media, third-party websites, and virtual experiences. So really, please make sure you register for that. And before you go, we're just going to ask you for one more minute of your time to give us your feedback on today's session. We're going to launch shortly a short poll, which you should be seeing on your screens right now. So once you complete and submit the poll, you'll be free to exit the webinar. But I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank Jonathan once more for joining us and explaining the opportunity that's available. And like I said, we'll share everything with you so that you can contact him if you're interested. And thanks to Rebecca for that really very informative presentation. See you again next week. And yeah, give us your feedback. We'd be happy to. We really want to know what you think about what these sessions are, how these sessions are helping you. And it's also going to be very useful for us in terms of when we put together future webinars. So we'd love to get your feedback. So make sure you fill out that poll on your screens. Thank you.